and getting the legato, instead of playing over the neck with a bar, placing an object like, in my case, I'm using to play bottleneck guitar, I'm using the neck of a bottle. And that's a uniquely American idea. I've never heard of anybody anywhere else doing it, except here. Well, I mean, now people do it all over the world, but it's American, it's derivation. Where it comes from, I don't know, but some people say that people in the South that were playing this style of guitar, that they were influenced by Hawaiian guitar players that were part of a popular Hawaiian craze. But the dates and places don't quite match up. W.C. Handy said that he heard a guy playing slide guitar like this at a train station in Tutwiler, Mississippi in 1903. Yeah. And what we know tells us that actually the technique was fairly widespread by then, playing the guitar with playing slide guitar like this. I'm going to call it bottleneck slide guitar because I'm playing with a bottle. But I've seen people do it with a length of pipe or even a bone from a beef roast, you know, and a big old piece of bone. But the idea is it's like Hawaiian guitar in that we use an open chord tuning mostly to play this. So here's an open chord tuning. People call these alternative tunings, but they're not alternative tunings. E-A-D-G-B-E, which we now call standard tuning, right, is the alternative tuning. These tunings are archaic and were in use for the guitar long before anybody tuned it the way we usually do now, which that's a 19th century construct that has to do with the modernization of the guitar. But open chord tunings for the guitar date back to the 18th century and maybe probably earlier, when guitars were much smaller than they are now, and mostly guitars had 5 strings instead of 6. This whole thing about a big instrument like this with 6 strings and everything like that, that's a 19th century deal. And so open tunings. And the tuning that I'm in right now, and I've heard people use these same tunings. I've heard caipira players from the south of Brazil. I've heard Russian gypsies, of course Hawaiians, all different kinds of people. And they use the same tunings. I'm tuned to a chord triad. So this tuning is called Vastapool in the vernacular, and I'm tuning my guitar D, A, D, F sharp, A, and D. So the 6th string, the 3rd string, the 2nd string, and the 1st string are tuned lower than standard pitches, and I'm tuned to the elements of a D major chord, a D, an A, 2 of them to be precise, 3 Ds, and right here in the middle, an F sharp. There's your major 3rd. And most open tunings are like that. It's basically 1s and 5s with a 3rd in there somewhere. Yeah.
What did you call it? A bass?
Vastapool.
Vastapool.
Vastapool. Yeah, it's an American vernacular construction based around the name Sebastopol. Sebastopol. And everybody knows about Sebastopol. It's been in the news just lately, as a matter of fact. It's a hot spot once again. It's in Crimea, and it's a big port on the Black Sea. And back in the, well, you know, at the time of the Crimean War, the siege of Sebastopol was a pivotal battle in that conflict, right? And there was a lot written about it. And there was a 19th century guitar composer and pedagogue whose name was Henry Worrell. He was one of the brightest lights in the 19th century American guitar firmament. And he published a lot of guitar methods with songs that he composed, instrumentals, like easy instrumentals that you can learn for the guitar. Henry Worrell, very well known. And he, I think it was in the 1840s, or no, well, the siege of Sebastopol was in 1852. Anyway, around the middle of the 19th century, he published a tune that was called Sebastopol, a Descriptive Fantasy. It goes something like this. got 4 parts, and it has bang. That's supposed to be a cannon and everything. And Henry Worrell was a fabulous. But anyway, and it's from that piece, which was it was transcribed in this tuning. A lot of 19th century guitar, popular guitar, was in open tunings because it's easy to play in an open tuning. You can play arpeggio on the bass strings and get a full chord, and then you can play a whole melody just on one string. Popular guitar. So the open tunings were in place. As far as the slide thing, I don't know. W.C. Handy said that he saw a guy playing it in 1903 in a train station in Tutwiler, Mississippi. There were demonstrably no Hawaiians in Tutwiler, Mississippi in 1903. So the whole thing about, you know, influenced by Hawaiian guitar players, I don't want to diminish the importance of the Hawaiian guitar music in the American tradition, and certainly a lot of steel guitar players and stuff like that were influenced by the techniques employed. But this particular technique, people seem to think that it had its nascence independent of the whole Hawaiian thing. And so anyway, I see that some of you have guitars. And we can do some hands-on stuff if you want to, but first I want to give a little overview over here. So I'm going to play something in Vastapool. Let me see. One of the really great guitar players that was fond of this tuning, who kind of rehabilitated the popularity of bottleneck guitar back in the 1920s, was a guy named Hudson Whitaker. His actual name was Hudson Woodbridge, but for some reason he used his mother's name instead of his father's, so it was Hudson Whitaker. But that didn't matter because nobody called him either Woodbridge or Whitaker or Hudson either, and they all called him Tampa Red. That was his name. And he made a lot of recordings back in the 1920s and 30s on into the 40s. He was a pioneer of electric guitar in the 1930s, and before that he played resophonic guitars like the one that I'm playing here. Let me see if I can't play some of his stuff. He was very influential. He was a very influential guitarist at the time because in the 1920s he made hit records that were a salient characteristic of these records was his slide guitar playing. He was very good, and like a lot of slide guitar players, I've heard this said, it was said about my own favorite slide guitar player, Furry Lewis, with whom I used to play. And Dan Penn, the great blue-eyed soul guy, told me one time, he said, yeah, Furry, he said, what a great guitar player. He doesn't play a lot of notes, he just owns every note he plays. Right? So I'll play a little, I'm going to try to quote Tampa Red here. It's hard to do, but he would play stuff like this. Slow blues, that's a Tampa Red thing. You know, it sounds like You Gotta Move or Sitting on Top of the World. Things about coming my way. And then, let's see. I wonder if I can play this. What time is it? It's almost noon. I think I can play it. This is a guitar instrumental. I'll quote a little bit of Tampa Red here. This is called the Boogie Woogie Dance. This is how it works right over here. Tampa Red. There's a good name to put in your database if you don't have it. If you're interested in a high-level bottleneck guitar playing, he's a good guy, and he was fairly prolific, his recordings, and he was also a great songwriter. He wrote a lot of songs that we like. He also influenced other slide guitar players who subsequently became better known in the modern parlance than he was. He was kind of a godfather in Chicago, where he moved and spent most of his musical and professional career, and he mentored younger players who came to that city and helped them. He had a big apartment with a rehearsal studio in the basement, and it was a big hangout for people. He had a bar down there. It was lots of fun, you know, that's what I heard. And also younger players who would sometimes stay with him when they got to Chicago, had no place to go, and he would help them out with gigs, help them out with money sometimes too, I think. And a little brown glass bottle when they needed one. And he influenced a couple of slide guitar players that we might have heard more about. One of his acolytes was a guy named Elmore James, right? And when Elmore James, for instance, one of Elmore James's better known songs, because it was covered by like some famous guy, is called "The Sky Is Crying," and the absolutely wrenching guitar introduction to that song, a highly emotive slide guitar introduction on Elmore James's beautiful slow blues. There, he's quoting his master, Tampa Red. He's playing exactly like something he learned directly from Tampa Red. And another guitar player that was heavily influenced by Tampa Red for his melismatic use of single strings and his ability to create solos with a relatively small number of notes that really told a story, right? And his absolute drop-dead control of pitch and vibrato, right, was Muddy Waters. Muddy Waters, who was very forthcoming about the creative debt that he owed to Tampa Red, the sort of a granddaddy of bottleneck guitar players. And then there's one more little thing. I'll play a snatch of it. It's interesting because it's a song that was first recorded in 1923 by a guy who played both Hawaiian-style guitar and bottleneck guitar and also standard guitar. He was a very well-known guitarist at the time in his hometown of Louisville, Kentucky. His name was Sylvester Weaver, and he came to the attention of the recording industry when Victor Records, I believe it was, came down to Louisville in 1923, and they wanted to record a great blues singer from there. Her name was Sarah Martin, and she was well known not only for her ability to sing, but also for her musicality, which led her to have really good bands. And also, she was a great songwriter. She wrote her own hits. So if you know anything about the record industry, of course, they were all over Sarah Martin. So Sarah's producer came down there, Ralph Peer, pretty well known in the industry. And he said on this particular occasion, he said, well, Sarah, he said, things are different than they were last year. We want to make a session. Of course, we want a hit record. We know you can deliver because you have. And she had the tunes as well. There was one song called Death Sting Me Blues that appealed to the mordant presentiments of the record-buying public at the time. They thought it had hit written all over it, right? And Sarah was certainly capable of delivering. She had vocal firepower, but Ralph was saying, well, we got a little competition that we didn't have. Those records that came out last year by that woman, you know her from vaudeville, Bessie Smith, right? So the market's a little more crowded than it was before. What I want to do is I want to put something on your record, a sound that makes it different, a sound that's never been heard on a blues record before, that makes your record sound different from other records. And Sarah Martin said, slide guitar. And Ralph Peer said, what's that? And she said, that's for me to know and you to find out. Just make sure the machine's running properly. She got on the honk and she said, Sylvester Weaver, come on down here. Right? So Sylvester Weaver played early slide guitar on a lot of her records. In the studio, his guitar virtuosity back in 1923 attracted the attention of the engineers and the producer. They said, God, you're a good guitar player. And he was like, duh, I'm Sylvester Weaver, you know what I mean? So anyway, he wound up recording guitar solos of his own, as many of the accompanying musicians did back in those days. And he spent several years making his own records and also accompanying Sarah Martin on the road and in the studio. Anyways, notable about it is he recorded a thing that he called the guitar rag, and the melody that he used for this germinal slide guitar piece is one I'm sure you recognize. I'll play a little bit of this Sylvester Weaver thing. All right.
What year was that?
1923.
So that predated Leon McAuliffe.
It predated Leon McAuliffe by 14 years. And not only that, but by the time Leon McAuliffe got around, this is Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys, and their first hit that they recorded in 1935, and it hit for them in 36, was an instrumental featuring their steel guitarist, Leon McAuliffe, and he used that melodic theme for the steel guitar rag, which was, you know, one of the flag wavers for Bob Wills' early Texas Playboys. Take it away, Leon, right? So anyway, and then late in life, Leon McAuliffe was being interviewed by some Europeans that were even smarter than me, and they said, Mr. McAuliffe, we noticed that your first guitar instrumental, the steel guitar rag, is identical melodically and you know, to the guitar rag recorded by Sylvester Weaver 14 years earlier. And Leon McAuliffe, with the aplomb of a true professional, says, I never heard of that guy. I learned that song from my brother. But anyway, yeah, it's the same thing. And actually, in between Sylvester and Leon, there were a number of recordings of that song. And then subsequently, every steel guitar player has a version of it. I mean, Buddy Emmons, everybody recorded it. And a lot of Western bands that featured steel guitar players used it as a flag waver, a break song, and everything like that. And also other guitarists. I mean, Merle Travis did a version of it. And, you know, everybody's gotten their hand in. I recorded it, you know, more than once. Anyway, that's a guitar rag, Sylvester Weaver. So he was posthumously, or at least after his music career, he was recognized, you know, for his influence. He left professional music in 1928 and took a job as a cab driver. He'd had enough of the music business. Any questions from guitar players about what I'm doing? Yeah.
Do you normally wear the slide on your pinky, or?
Yeah, and the reason why is the advantage of playing slide guitar. I always tell everybody, if you want really good tone, really good pitch control, really clean chords with your slide, then put it on your knees. They call it lap guitar, you know, lap style guitar, which is, you won't get anywhere if you put the guitar on your lap. You know, these are people that don't know where they have an odd idea. You actually put the guitar on your knees is what you do, and they should call it knee style guitar, right? Because your lap is over here, you can't do that. It's here, and you play like this, right? And there's all kind of things you can do, like bar slants, you know, and things like that that are easier to do when you play in transverse style than they are when you play bottleneck. The advantage of bottleneck playing is that you can use the fingers that are not employed with the slide to make chords. And that's really that's at the basis of the style. So most players, you can play slide guitar. I know some slide guitar players who are quite good that wear it on their third finger, right? But actually the most sense, and I mean most of the good slide guitar players like Tampa Red, you know, and everybody up to like Ry Cooder and Leo Kottke and, you know, modern people that we're familiar with, wear the slide on their fourth finger, because then you've got three fingers free and you can make these chords, right? And that's the, so a lot of slide guitar players use that to effect. One of the guys that I heard when I was little, that, well, I wasn't that little, but you know, young, was a guy who was named Booker White, Booker Washington White. He was from Mississippi, lived in Memphis, and he had this thing where he did these train imitations, right? And so with a combination of slapping and chording and strumming, and then he'd get his bottleneck in there, and he would do these freight train things, you know. Just then I heard the Panama Limited blowing 10 miles outside of Memphis, Tennessee. Play it low and lonesome, boy, 'cause I used to hobo sometime myself. Booker White. So wearing it on the fourth finger. I know there's a guy that plays around here a lot. You probably heard him. His name is Mike Dowling, right? He's a colleague of mine, and we both play national guitars and endorse them and, you know, run around from pile to post, telling everybody how great they are.